Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. So today we're going to be doing another look, sort of guide but not really. I'm not going to be telling you how to play them, I'm just going to be telling you like kind of what they're about. But this time it's, this is for Fatal Knockout, by the way, Fatal Knockout Fighters. This time it is for the Zoner. So the Zoner was briefly in the last video with the Grappler, but this time I'm going to be going more in depth into her kit, which is... It's deceptively complex, but really easy to get into. It's just got that depth, that really, really high skill ceiling, that if you use her correctly, you can do some insane combos if the other player isn't privy to how she works. So, first of all, let me show you the Zoner. So the Zoner actually has probably the smallest player piece, but that's because she actually has two player pieces, the only fighter which does. She also has a weapon as well. And just a little tidbit, the Grappler and the Zoner were the first two fighters that I decided to design because I thought they're kind of like the opposite of each other. So yeah, these are the two pieces for the fighter. These are prototype pieces, by the way. These were cut with like laser cut, which is why they're made out of wood. They're not going to be like that in the final version. Like you can see some laser edges there. But yeah, so the way it'll work on the board is that for the most part of the game, well, it depends on how you play her, the Zoner will be taking the forefront of the stage whilst the weapon will sort of follow her behind. So that's when she's got the weapon. So first of all, you can see the fact that she might not have the weapon the whole time, depending on how you play her. But yeah, next thing to show you is the asymmetric board. So here is a board. Again, the only asymmetry is the meter gain. As you can see here, unlike the Grappler, she has more shields. She's very heavily, especially early game, but also near late game as well. She's very heavily focused on protecting herself because she needs to survive long enough to be able to get that range, to be able to zone the player out and start controlling the game. So you're playing for a long game here with Zoner. It's going to be a bit difficult to sort of shut out the match early on with the Zoner character. I mean, if you're incredible, there's some players in the Fatal Knockout scene at the moment which are absolutely insane with the Zoner. So who knows? They might be able to kill me in like a couple of rounds. But I won't play past them. But yeah, so like every other fighter, they have 14 cards in their deck as well as their ultimate card. What I'm actually going to do is, because I forgot to mention it in the previous video with the Grappler ultimate card at the end of this video, I'm just going to quickly show off the Grappler ultimate card as well, but I'll make sure to definitely do it for the Zoner fighter. So, first of all, before we actually get into the cards, I want to show off the unique abilities for the Zoner. So the Grappler has one, whilst the Zoner technically has three, but they're all related to around the same ability to do with the weapon. So, first of all, on the reference card, it's a bit small here. The cards can be worked out later to be a bit more polished. But the first piece of the reference card shows that if the weapon icon is present on the attack, that means the weapon will be in use during the attack. So, here's an example of a card here, Control Attack, which surprisingly has gone through a lot of iteration, considering it's such a simple card. But it was one of the cards which is kind of like in the middle of the initiative average in the deck. Like, I think the initiative average is around like actually a 4.5 or something like that, so it's a bit higher. But as you can see here with the bottom attack, it reads, attack 2 to 3 spaces away, but you must have your weapon. It is a weapon-based attack, which is like that for every single card in the Zoner deck apart from one, which has where she has a knockback attack, so she can attack melee and push you back at the same time, and that'll be for 1 damage. So yeah, the reason why that is important is because the sort of passive rule with the Zoner is if you miss an attack, because with every action, if there isn't a slash between them, then you have to do it. So with the top card, it says either move 1 forward or push a fighter 1 space, that's 1 space in front of you, 1 space away. So like you can choose between the two, but the bottom is you have to attack. So if you miss that attack, then you must choose which of the red spaces for the weapon to land on, because you've missed the attack and you've thrown the weapon. The idea in context is that if you hit them, it'll bounce back off them and come back to you. So that's where it gets a bit interesting, because it allows for multiple different playstyles. So the first thing really is what most players will do, especially when they start playing her, is they will just try and do damage with throwing the weapon. If they miss, then they go pick up their weapon, or they retrieve the weapon in some other way, which you can do. But if you get more into the fighter, and what a lot of really, really good Zoner fighters do, is they sometimes purposefully miss in order to zone out the opponent. And I'll explain how that works. So, we're going to skip retrieve weapon, I will explain that in a second. We're actually going to go on to the remote detonation action. So, once the weapon is on the ground, this is an action which you can only do if you don't have your weapon. So, there's kind of like two states to the fire. Then you can do damage from that weapon onto the board. So the way this icon reads is that if the weapon's on the ground, then you can do damage to the left, to the right, and in front of the weapon. So the weapon is off to the side of the stage, well, it's like behind the stage, so it'll do damage in front, to the left, and to the right of the stage. And if the fighter is in those spaces, they will take damage. So that's one way that, like, if you've got a weapon in front of you, then the other fighter, if they might be worried you have cards which allow you to do remote attacks, so they might just actively try and avoid those spaces, but it's like, how do you close them down? And that's the way that you zone out the fighter. The problem is, though, is that if you're doing that to zone them out, then there is no active way to do damage, because you don't have your weapons, so you can't do any long-range attacks. So, what you can do, as well, there's two ways to retrieve a weapon. In the game, you can either walk up to the space that it's on and just pick it up. So if you're on the same space as the weapon, then you have the weapon. And the other way is to use the action retrieve weapon, which, as you can see, is on some cards here, like a super throw, which is one of the best cards in the deck, and probably one of the best cards in the game as well, because it has the opportunity to do 2 damage, which is very rare in decks. It's usually about 1 per deck on average. Some decks don't have them at all. But yeah. So the way retrieve weapon works is it's almost like, imagine like Thor's hammer, where he just calls it back. So he like holds out his hand, it gets called back, and the cool thing is first of all, you can retrieve it from anywhere on the board, so you don't have to be near it, so you don't have to go into danger, say if someone's camping your weapon. But also, like a physics object in a video game would work, if the fighter is, so say for example, I'm going to try and hold this up with 2 hands here. Say you've got the zoner here, you got the grappler here, and you got the weapon on the other side. If you retrieve weapon, and the weapon goes past the grappler to you, then it will hit the grappler and do damage. So this is great because, first of all, you get your weapon back, and you do damage, which leads into some really interesting combos, because it's almost like a passive way to do damage, because the ability itself doesn't guarantee damage. And it's not a damage ability, it's just a passive effect of the ability. So some of the cards are not balanced around this card being a damage-doing ability. So most cards don't allow you to have 2 attempts of doing damage. Like, they don't allow you to have 1 attack and then on the next action step another attack. Whilst with some of Zona's cards, they do, because they have an attack and retrieve weapon, or retrieve weapon and attack, or whatever. So that's another way to sort of combo up your moves, and there's some great potential there. Not on the surface, but if you get good at the game, and also you're in the right scenario, or like you plan out so you're in the right scenario, then you can have tremendous amounts of potential with your attacks. Not only that, as well, there's a lot of depth to this retrieve weapon action, but also you can really, really fake out opponents. So say, for example, if you throw your weapon down, and like previously, before you've thrown the weapon, they're like, oh, you've got the weapon. So say you've got the weapon at the start, and the zoner is behind my big sausage fingers there. Earlier in the turn, the other fighter might be like, I'm going to shield in front of me to protect myself from in front of me. So you might be like, okay, you can do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to purposefully miss you, throw the weapon behind you, and then retrieve the weapon so I hit you from behind instead of in front, therefore still doing damage to you because the shield was forward facing. Again, orientation, I mentioned this in the previous video, orientation is huge in this game. So yeah, before I forget, moving on to the ultimate card. The ultimate card is probably one of the more basic ultimate cards. It is very much just like, this is an example of an attack which you can do usually. Here's a better version. Here's like a super version of this attack. So, by the way, you get your ultimate cards at the end. This is a grappler one, but you get them at the end of the meter. So once you got to the end, you add this to the bottom of your draw pile. So this adds extra things as well, like you need to make sure that your draw pile is low enough so you get it early enough, like you draw it early enough, and you need to also time it so that you're not going to gain it once your deck has been reshuffled, because your deck can get reshuffled multiple times a game. If it gets reshuffled and then you gain it, then it could be 12 or 11 cards down in the deck, which could equate to 3 turns if you don't decide to discard any cards. But yeah, what this reads is the top card is do damage between 3 and 7 spaces away from you. So that could pretty much cover most of the board if the fighter isn't directly in front of you or you aren't at opposite ends of the stage. Now, obviously, the caveat is you have to have your weapon as well, and it'll do 2 damage, like I said. And then at the bottom, you can move up to 3 forward and 3 backwards, which is a great way to get out of the way. Now, with ultimate cards, as you can see at the top left here, they have relatively low initiative. They used to be initiative 1, which was insane because they'd be unavoidable. Whilst with initiative 3, there's still a chance of you being able to avoid them. So the way it works is they are super powerful cards at a low initiative cost. Now, just to go over the Grappler Ultimate, like I promised, the way the Grappler works, if you remember from the previous video, very, very, very situational. So you have to be right next to the opponent. You don't have to be facing any particular way, though, so it is a bit better that way. But you have to be right next to the opponent, and there is a potential for 4 damage. This is a game-winning card if in the right situation. Now, you have to, just to explain how situational it is, just to give you an example, there have been players before which have discarded this card because it's not the right situation. It is a worthless card unless you're in the exact right situation, which is the whole point of the Grappler. But yeah, the way this reads is you can either grab in front of or behind you, throw them the opposite way, and do 2 damage. And then at the bottom, it's like grab them in front of behind you, do 2 damage, and throw them the opposite way. So, you know, like in the Avengers, a lot of Marvel references in this video, but you know, like in the first Avengers movie where Hulk grabs Loki and just starts smashing him left and right, this is essentially what that card represents. But yeah, so that's it. That's the Zoner and also a tiny bit of the Grappler there. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you got an idea how the Zoner works. Very much like a Zoner which you'd find in a video game fighting game. But yeah, so thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you want any more of these videos, let me know. I'm just going to make these 2 for now and see if anybody wants any more. But yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I shall see you in the next one. Goodbye.